Today we are talking about the Game Awards, everyone's favorite video game award ceremony, and by everyone's favorite, I mean a lot of people's favorite motivator to come together and discuss video game pop culture, and a lot of people's favorite reminder to make fun of suits that make out-of-touch decisions in this industry. This is the time of the year where many laugh, cry, clap, and scream from the rooftops. This is the time of the year where only the finest modern-day philosophers crawl out of their dens of depravity to engage in the most intellectually stimulating and nuanced conversations to reach a consensus. Ah, what a time to be alive. Let's discuss the controversy of an expansion of a game being nominated for Game of the Year, and how this could one day lead to more accolades and rewards for Monster Hunter, which of course will lead to more people buying more Monster Hunter, which will in turn lead to more Monster Hunter. Because hopefully, if you are watching this, you love Monster Hunter as much as I do, and you think that the potential for more recognition, encouragement, and potential sales for the Monster Hunter team would be a good thing. You may be wondering how this situation is even remotely linked to Monster Hunter. Or you may already know and understand where I'm going with this before I even begin discussing the point of the video. I see you out there, stud muffin. Either way, I hope you have fun and learn something new along the way. First, let's talk a little bit about the convoluted history of Monster Hunter's expansive content. Monster Hunter is a long-standing series that has been kicking around for 20 years ever since Monster Hunter was released in Japan in March 2004. But there had never been an expansion that was not a standalone game until Monster Hunter World Iceborne in September of 2019. You see, Iceborne and later the Monster Hunter Rise equivalent Sunbreak added entirely new layers to their base games. They added new monsters, new master rank quests, new tiers of armors and weapons, and their own new mechanics. The expansions added a substantial amount of content that rivaled the size of the base game content, all for the nice price of $40 USD. This content is typically the fan favorite content and also what fans remember the games by the most. But here is where it gets weird. This type of expansion has existed since the very first Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter G released in Japan in January 2005. It was a kind of re-release of Monster Hunter, except with new monster subspecies, new tiers of armors and weapons, and the old Monster Hunter equivalent to Master Rank, G Rank, which stands for Goomba Rank. Just kidding. It stands for go subscribe and like this video. This trend would continue throughout most of the series, and when you ask most old generation Monster Hunter fans what their favorite old generation game in the series is, most of them will be listing off one of these G expansion versions of Monster Hunter games that had been released prior. Instead of Monster Hunter 4, people mostly talk about Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate as an example. These games were weird in concept because they were essentially re-released versions of the base game with the expansion as a standalone game. And the equally weird, but clever way Capcom got around you having to replay the entire game before being able to access the newest content is through their save file transfer system. This would transfer over your weapons, armor, items, materials, and your completed quests. Other things like your playtime or guild card achievements wouldn't carry over. Of course, there were sometimes slight differences between the expanded games and the base games, but for the sake of brevity, we will not be discussing that in this video. These expanded versions were kind of interesting, as it was not uncommon for a new player's experience, especially in Western countries, to first be with the expanded version of one of these games. A lot of people got their start with Monster Hunter Freedom Unite on the PSP. A lot of people got their start with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on 3DS. And funnily enough, a lot of people got their start with Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now I will show you how this applies to this. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree has been nominated to win Game of the Year at this year's The Game Awards. This nomination has stirred up quite a bit of controversy, with the common grievance being that the reward should be reserved for a game and not a DLC or expansion. They have a point. If you purchase Shadow of the Erdtree without purchasing Elden Ring, you would not even be able to play Shadow of the Erdtree. It is contingent on owning the base game after all.
I don't think a DLC should get Game of the Year. Because you can't play a DLC. You can only play the game that the DLC exists for. Damn it! Hey!
But then again, here comes the issue with price points and what is technically a DLC and what is technically a standalone game. People that believe that Shadow of the Erdtree may deserve the award would point to the amount of content available for the $40 price point. They may point to the fact that the expansion required years of dev time, and had they just released it as a $70 standalone named Elden Ring 2, nobody would bat an eye at its nomination. Of course, that neglects the fact that you have to beat a significant portion of the base game to access the contents of the actual Shadow of the Erdtree. They may even point back to 2016 when The Witcher 3's DLC Blood and Wine won Best RPG over the likes of Dark Souls 3 that came out that year, as precedent for DLC winning awards over games that were released the year of the ceremony, which is a fair point.
I agree that in the future we should change this, but it's here now. And for me personally, it's not even about this. It's not even about this. For me, it's about being spiteful and getting revenge for Dark Souls 3 losing Best RPG to Witcher
Oh my God, you are so right!
Of course, none of this would be an issue if there were more appropriate categories beyond just Best Ongoing Game. A Best DLC or Expansion category would work just fine. This actually gives room for the live service model and the DLC expansion model to win distinct awards, and it would give room to avoid controversy like this Game of the Year controversy altogether. And most importantly, this discussion allows me to open up the can of worms about Monster Hunter expansions. No matter what happens as a result of this year's The Game Awards, Monster Hunter has the chance to win more accolades and rewards in a pop culture setting. If the Shadow of the Erdtree nominations controversy bears no fruit and opens the door for expansions to win in the future, this gives Monster Hunter the chance to shine twice, with the base game release and the inevitable expansion. If the controversy sheds too much bad press on the Game Awards and they decide to put forth different awards to accommodate complicated scenarios like this, with things like the commonly proposed Best DLC or Expansion category, that gives Monster Hunter a place to shine. In fact, it gives Monster Hunter the capability to shine in two separate places, as since World, it has been customary for new content to be added in the free title updates throughout the course of the entire base game and expansion cycles. And these title updates are often where we see some of the most memorable pinnacle content. As it stands now, Monster Hunter is at a disadvantage with the way that these awards have been treated. No longer are the games sold with standalone game-style expansions, yet the games are remembered most fondly oftentimes after the expansion providing that extra echelon of content. And this expansion content is in a similar spot as something like Shadow of the Erdtree. Way more content than the average game, let alone DLC, and for the price point of $40. The expansion content also affects the base game content greatly. With both Iceborne and Sunbreak, weapon balancing changes shook the game up pretty intensely. They even affect the base game if you don't own the expansion. Iceborne's changes were the most drastic, with the inclusion of entirely new moves and attacks with weapons and the inclusion of the Clutch Claw. Someone that bought Monster Hunter World Day 1 probably remembers when monsters would fall asleep right in front of your face when you chased them while they were near death. Day 1 players also probably remember the absolute toxicity of the player base flinching each other while carving to keep players from getting their materials. Of course, this was changed rather quickly. Base game players also remember playing through the game with no Clutch Claw stagger on the monsters. People that played Monster Hunter World pre-Iceborne were playing a game with slight differences compared to the people that got into the game with Iceborne's inclusion. Even if you were to play base World right now without owning Iceborne, the changes are still present. The older version of World exists now just in the memory of those that experienced it. All of this is just a long-winded way of saying that as the Game Awards worked before, Monster Hunter was at a clear disadvantage. Yet, consistently, it has provided premium content on top of content, or even rectified issues with an initial launch with its definitive experience. And yet, there has not been a seat for the games to sit. Respect the Game Awards or not, think of it as a legitimate award ceremony or not, it doesn't really matter. Whether you like it or not, the Game Awards holds the most prestigious awards in the gaming world right now. And whether you like it or not, a prestigious award that may be meaningless to you is not meaningless to the companies that make the games that win, or the clueless parent or friend shopping for the gamer in their life for the holidays. And if the Monster Hunter team delivers with Wilds, and even further with the expansion, they will deserve all the recognition, praise, and extra sales that they can get. The more success that this series has, the more we will get from the series. Big thanks to Shadow of the Erdtree for shaking this ceremony up. It'll be through this controversy that Monster Hunter will be given an even bigger opportunity to shine. Stay meaty, my friends.
Do you think Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree should win Game of the Year? Oh. I see you're thinking quite hard about it. Oh.
I've got dinner ready. Let him cook.